My name is Mark Sherman. I live on Hancock Avenue in Ward 3. Since 2015, I've been trying to work with the Department of Public Works to ensure that any LED conversions meet the public health needs that have been identified by people all over the country and all over the world in relation to these lights, which are sometimes too bright and which are sometimes too high on the color spectrum, too close to the blue end of the spectrum. Lighting is a public health issue, and it's also an aesthetic issue. And I have long been concerned that whatever we did with the overhead streetlights, which the council considered last year, that we might at some point lose the decorative streetlights, the historic shorter streetlights in the Old Town section, which to me are such a special part of what we do. I created a really little slideshow about this. Is it possible to load that? I don't know. If so, I can use that. If not, I'll just speak extemporaneously. In what you just heard about the city of Takoma Park, and I'm so glad I came tonight to learn more about the history of my own city. Takoma Park is often being held up as a model for other municipalities. But it's also incumbent upon Takoma Park to listen to expertise elsewhere and not assume that we have all the expertise in our own hands. And so what concerns me most about what's been proposed is that the configuration put forward by the Department of Public Works, riding on a contract to our created by Anne Arundel County, is not something that the International Dark Sky Association thinks would be a good idea. I shared with their technical director, Pete Strasser, what the city has proposed. And Mr. Strasser was quite forthright in saying that what was proposed is not something that that association would ever approve. Here's my little slideshow. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So in addition to what a light looks like during the daytime, and here we have a nice shot of the light by the farmer's market. You can go to the next slide. There's one by the hardware store. It's also the type of light inside and the way that that light is shielded. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. The old lights have a yellow hue, and it's partly the casing, that translucent covering that you see there, and it's also the type of light that's inside. You can go to the next slide. This is the sample light that was installed, I learned yesterday morning, on Columbia Avenue to the side of the Long and Foster building at One Pine Avenue. And you can, if you look carefully, you'll see the street lights that are green in the background, but then below the street lights you see two little yellow things. Those are two of the existing old-style lamps, and the thing in the foreground is the new thing. I took that with an iPhone camera, but the camera doesn't really do justice to the distinction in the type of lights we're looking at. You can go to the next slide. That's a shot during the daytime. The thing about this sample light is that there was no notice to the public that this was a sample light. There was no way for anybody to say, oh, geez, I'm going to come check that out and weigh the merits of the proposal of putting that same light fixture in the rest of the Old Town area. You can go to the next slide. And in contrast, this is one of the older lamps, which doesn't overwhelm the camera or the human eye. You can go to the next slide. There's also the issue of context. We've had a growing number of lights on the sides of buildings. This is the Bank of America. They got 5 lights just on that one side of the building. And that's the end of my slideshow. You can close it. I didn't have the opportunity to do more. The fact that I only learned about this yesterday morning, I think, is a sign that the process for public input has been inadequate on this issue. And I'd be happy to share with the Council the very detailed comments by Pete Strasser of the International Dark Sky Associations. When I shared those comments with the Director of the Public Works, she said she preferred to follow the city's own expert, who is an account executive with the company that is selling us the lights. Now, I expect salespeople to know something about their products, but they're not a disinterested party. And so I urge the Council to vote no, something that's difficult to do, to vote no tonight, because we have not had the benefit of the input of the organization that is head and shoulders the most expert organization on what type of lights cities should consider when making these type of installations. Please don't make a decision tonight that would forever alter the character of our Old Town district. Thank you very much.
Next, we'll take up the single reading ordinance authorizing purchase of decorative street light fixtures. And we have the Director of Public Works here. And I believe there's some information in our blue folders from the Director as well.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to update you on this particular project. One of the things that's taken me by surprise is, and shouldn't, I guess, is this has been a long time coming. This isn't a new thing. It's not something that we took lightly either. For over 10 years now, the city's been upgrading its decorative streetlights throughout the Old Town and Takoma Junction. I don't know if any of you can recall. We're doing a lot of looking back at history tonight, but we first started this three-phase project in the Takoma Junction. I don't know if you can recall, Takoma Junction used to have 18-foot tall streetlights with double lights posts on them that were quite old, and in fact, one fell over when someone leaned on it once. So the priority number one in the first phase of that project was to relamp the streetlights in the Takoma Junction area. There's about 22 decorative streetlights that were put in there. And in conjunction with our planning office, as well as Old Town Business Association, as well as the Historic Preservation Commission, which all this was discussed and approved and reviewed through, the decision was made to have continuity between Old Town and the Junction in terms of the decorative streetlights, and to provide that ambiance and that essential additional, what we call pedestrian level lighting, not the overhead streetlights, but actually the ambient light within the footprint of people's pedestrian areas, the front of the commercial stores, and that wide expanse of sidewalk that you come across. So that project was undertook, as I mentioned, almost 10 years ago. The next phase of the project was when the city planning office embarked on that streetscape improvement in the 7100 block of Carroll Avenue. So we had 9 decorative streetlights that were installed there. The selection of the streetlight type was always meant to emulate the Old Town lights. So, of course, as time goes by, we can't purchase those same types of lights anymore. And I think in the pictures you have presented from me and earlier emails to you, you should have that comparison, a picture of the Old Town streetlight, which is now gray, and the new streetlight. They're not identical, but they're emblematic, and they resemble each other to the closest degree. And in fact, that was a primary interest of the Historic Preservation Commission when we brought this to them on several occasions during both the Takoma Junction lighting change as well as 7100 block of Carroll Avenue lighting change. Those lights, as I mentioned, the 7100 block has about 9 lights. We now, we requested funding in this current fiscal year, which is just about ending, and presented that during the budget discussions over a year ago about completing the third phase of the project of lighting upgrade the Old Town area. And in those cases, what we are hoping to do is maintain the same light fixture. We're not changing the fixture type or the appearance to the degree that we can emulate it as close to what we had before, but we wanted to update and upgrade those. Any of you that were around when we were doing our initial greenhouse gas emissions inventory, we had an outdoor lighting study done, and at that point the recommendation was made for us to move ahead into a new technology of induction lighting. So all of our outdoor lighting that we've done since that time, and that's been 15 plus years, has all been induction level lighting, and we've been very, very happy with induction level lighting. The quality of the light is quite nice, and the longevity of the light. You know, we have lights that last 10 years or more, so it really helps with the maintenance issues. Unfortunately, induction lighting is becoming harder and harder to purchase. Part of the reason of that is that as technology improves and changes, and we've seen incredible change within the LED technology, that lighting technology is overwhelming and kind of has passed by induction lighting. So our lighting suppliers can still get induction lighting, and we still have to maintain and hope to maintain our previous 30-some lights in the Takoma Junction area that are induction, but we feel like we need to make the shift going forward in this next last phase of the project to maintain the same fixture, but to move ahead with the new technology. And again, this wasn't done lightly. We've had lighting experts in the field with us looking at our light. That's who we purchase our lighting from. C.N. Robinson is a wonderful organization that provides lighting for us and has been doing quite a bit of work with us in a number of ways, both interior work as well as exterior work and lighting improvements. These aren't folks that are just interested in selling us a product. Our success is their success, and they don't want us to purchase a product that would not work well. So they've been on site. They've done nighttime visits. They've been in our meetings with Pepco. They've participated with us as we move forward in this next level of lighting. So when I say that I want to take my advice from the lighting experts that we've been working with, what I mean to say is I want to take my lighting advice from folks who have been there looking at the light, walking with us on the street, understanding the market and the availability of the lights in our area, and working with us in a partnership to get these lights installed. The other issue that you will see if you look at that photo of the existing Old Town lights is they're fairly decrepit. It is time for them to be updated. They aren't attractive. They were attractive in their day, and we certainly, as I mentioned, try to emulate that style of fixture and that style of pole in the new lights we've installed. But they are yellowed, they are broken, they are cracked. The fixtures need to get updated, and the poles need to be painted. So our program this evening and what we're trying to move forward is again, as I mentioned, just the final phase of a lighting upgrade that we've been working on for over a decade. Let me see if there's anything that I hadn't gotten to yet. In terms of the lighting levels, we did have a sample light installed, again, all part of our process of making sure that we're getting what we want to get and that works in our neighborhood. That information about the sample light is on the cover sheet. That cover sheet was produced over 2 weeks ago, so that information has been available and certainly was not intended to be unknown or unshared. And I've certainly let folks know about that light. We all on a staff level have spent quite a bit of time looking at it, again, because we wanted to make sure that what we were proposing was something that we were comfortable with. So the fixtures that we're proposing to purchase this evening are identical to the ones in the junction and on the 7100 block. However, they are recommended to have the LED lighting instead of the induction lighting. A couple other details just about the technology. I tried to include some information. There's been lots of discussion from our first overhead streetlight conversations about Kelvin or color rendering and light temperatures. And I found it interesting to note that our initial decorative streetlights were incandescent, so they were a very nice white light. And our first energy upgrade 20-some years ago was to put in high-pressure sodium. And at that point in time, people loved the high-pressure sodium because they looked like gas lights. They were these nice yellow glow. So our old fixtures had these nice yellow lights in them, and it looked like a gas light glow. And when we shifted to induction, which was a white light again and matched our early incandescent lights, there was again a little bit of shift and opinions as the color changed, and we went from that gas light look back again to the white light look. All this gets a little into the minutia and detail, but what I try to provide in that information about color that I included there is a little bit of information about what the Kelvin scale is and how that ranges in terms of light color as you increase in Kelvin. What I've been told and what I've experienced with myself is that most people, the human eye, can't detect the difference between a 2700 Kelvin and a 3200 Kelvin. It's just not something that we're sensitive enough to see. You get into the 4000 Kelvin, 5000 Kelvin, that's very, very obvious and visible. So the lighting level distinctions that we're talking about here are ones that are really getting into the fine detail that most people would not experience. When we had our streetlight discussion, we talked about making a limit of 3,000 Kelvin based on the American Medical Association's recommendation about LED and lighting levels. There's still a lot of discussion and back and forth about that in the lighting technology industries, but I think that's a safe standard to stick with, and we're comfortable with the 3,000 Kelvin. Our future LED lighting retrofits all have 3,000 as the maximum Kelvin. The light fixtures that we're proposing to replace in Old Town were initially specified with a 3,000 Kelvin. Since the questions have come up about this issue, we've gone back to the manufacturer or our supplier to have them ask the manufacturer whether we could get 2,700 Kelvin, and we can. They can manufacture those. Our lighting is being made for us. It's not something off the shelf. So 3,000 Kelvin is not common in outdoor lighting settings. More likely it's 4,000 and 5,000, so they're making a special light for us. We can crank it down to 2,700 if we like. In terms of the lens, the white glass versus the prismatic glass, that's just the way the lighting fixture is. There's not a whole lot we can do about that. The last piece of information I wanted to provide was some detail about the LED technology itself. It really is an entirely different type of lighting element than what we've had before. So LED is quite a different type of light, and it works differently in the fixtures. And I guess lastly, if you haven't had a chance to see the sample light that we've had up, I would encourage you to do so and provide any feedback you might have. Most folks can't tell the difference between the two lights on that corner as to which one's the LED and which one's the induction. They're pretty similar. One last point is we did also order or make a request in our order that the lights be able to be dimmed. So in the event that the wattage level that we've chosen is seen in some areas of that section, and again, we're talking about Carroll Avenue from Willow to Columbia and the section of Laurel Avenue where there's a total of 30-some lights. We've already replaced 4 of those as they were crashed into or tipped over or box truck knocked them over. So there's 26 left of the gray type lights with the white lens that hasn't been replaced. So.
Council questions, comments? Councilmember Schultz?
Just to clarify, in your last couple sentences, you wanted us to look at the comparison, and you're talking about the one at the corner of Columbia and Pine.
Carroll. Columbia and Carroll.
Columbia and
Carroll.
Carroll.
Yeah, it's in between Pine and Carroll and Columbia.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, and the one next to it is one of the older ones.
The one in front of Lawn and Foster is the LED, and the one in front of the Blue House is induction.
Okay.
As are all the other ones in front of 7100.
Thanks. That's all I had to ask.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the lengthy presentation tonight.
Yeah, sorry.
I look at the photo and the different lighting fixtures that you've proposed or what was there and what you're proposing. And, I see nothing wrong with it. It looks like an almost identical fixture. But I think the concern wasn't that we heard the comments this evening wasn't about the fixture itself, but more about the light that's emitted from it. And I'm not an expert in lighting, and you've talked with someone who is. But as I hear the comment tonight, that there's this other organization that has raised serious concern about this type of lighting. And I think about the other lights that we're going to be planning to install. I think probably some on changing some of the lighting on Flower Avenue or other places around the city. That I wonder if it's time for this council to hear from the experts and see whether there's some things that we should know and be a little more knowledgeable about.
Ever-changing technology, and so some of it's hard to keep up, which is why you need folks in the industry to be providing guidance. The one thing I will say is we have been in touch with the Dark Sky Association extensively when we talked about the street lighting issues. So we're well versed with those staff people. We're also working with the Department of Energy and the Outdoor Lighting Accelerator. So we have peers in other cities that we collaborate with and talk to. My main concern about the information that was recently presented from Pete Strasser at the Dark Sky Association is that he's never been here. He doesn't know the lights we're talking about. He doesn't know the area. He doesn't know what we're trying to light. A couple of the comments he made about, decorative lights are just sort of decorative. They don't serve a function, and you should put 10-watt bulbs in them. Obviously, you haven't walked in our street to see that. We need lighting levels on the ground that's safe for people to be around at night, and it does much more than just a decorative light. So we need a wattage level of light that's sufficient to provide the adequate lighting. And we're also quite sensitive to the color issues. I guess experts can disagree about things, but one of the things that I think we have to be very careful with is we want our experts to be working in here. Walk Carroll Avenue and tell me what you think we should do with the decorative lights.
Right, I sure think that's fair. And just lastly, I'll say that, having the notice about the sample light out there on the cover page for the council is a whole lot different than the public knowing about it. As you know, people don't sit there and just wait for those cover sheets to come out.
Sure.
So if we truly want public input on a sample like that, we need a better way of letting them know in a longer period of time for it to be available for them to look at.
Yeah. Well, I think I was just surprised by the interest because we've been talking about LED lighting for several years. So.
Thank you.
Councilman Bell?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Braithwaite, for the presentation. A couple of comments and questions. Last year for my daughter's birthday, I bought her one of those programmable LED light bulbs that can change from blue to red to green to purple and back again in like 300 different colors. And I guess I bring that up in sort of a light way, but the ability to change the tone of the light is something that programmable LEDs now offer. You mentioned that the lights will be dimmable to some extent, so that sounds good. But I guess one of the things that I guess because of the number of replacements we've had to do because light poles get struck for various reasons, is the fixture itself that the bulb sits in, whether that's a fixture that's likely has some chance of enduring more than 2 to 3 years so that we'll be able to get replacement light bulbs, and then the pole itself. So, the cost of those poles, the durability of those poles, so that they're likely to survive their first strike from, a mirror.
Yeah.
Can you add a little more detail on those issues?
Sure. That fixture head, let's break it apart to the fixture and the pole. The fixture head is identical to the one we use for induction for LED. So it's the outside housing. We can have whatever lighting technology we want put inside it. So in the past, we've had an induction technology. What we're proposing for the future is an LED technology, but the housing and the size is identical. So if we were to tell our supplier, put an LED light fixture in that same housing, we could do that. And in fact, when we've gone from originally incandescent to high-pressure sodium, the first range were all done with the same fixture housings. So if we decided we wanted to change the light type, that's feasible. I don't have any idea what the cost is relative to the fixture itself, how much of it is the LED lighting and how much is the outside fixture itself. For the particular last bit of lights that we're doing, these remaining 26, we're not going to change the pole. The pole is in good shape. We're actually just going to paint the pole. So there's been cases, when a car hits the pole and we have to replace the pole. We don't tend to have mirror hits. We tend to have just full-on drunk driver plowing over the lights. So no survival, no survival right there. Though we do had an uncanny number of the fixture tops being hit by box trucks turning. So the pole will remain, and it looks like the light's been decapitated. So the light fixture's gone, but the pole stands. So at any rate, with this last round, we're just going to paint the pole and put new fixture heads on them, and they are interoperable.
Okay. A couple more comments. I mentioned the ability to change color because it would be super cool to be able to have all the colors of the rainbow for Pride period or the 4th of July colors, and that would be just sort of a neat
Or
thing
gun
that would make
violence awareness. It was very hard to find orange. though.
orange, orange, yep. And then the other comment is on the racial equity impact statement. I know this is a work in progress. We're getting better at it. And I would just note in a situation like this, when we talked about the Ethan Allen, New Hampshire intersection, the way we talked about it as being a project that had, or the way we described the racial impact was we said this is in Ward 6, which has a population of. And so I think to be fair, when we look at things like this, this is a set of lights that is primarily in a ward with largely relatively well-off and more homogeneous racial mix. So we should describe that as well. One of my concerns with the racial equity analysis is that we would use it when it made things look good. And so I want to make sure we do that fairly. So I just wanted to point that out.
Councilmember Qureshi?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Ms. Braithwaite. I also am not a light expert, but I did happen to walk by the new fixture. And, I hear Mr. Sherman's point. It doesn't have a different impact on me, but I might not be sensitive to that, or I might just be oblivious and have 1,000 things going on in my head. But there was some communication this week, and I just do this for the benefit of the public that's watching and the public record. I know it's, I guess, in some ways part of the public record, the communications with Mr. Sherman and yourself, but there was this discussion of 3,000 Kelvin versus 2,700. I think you did sort of discuss in one of your more recent communications in response that it is something that's that may not be discernible to everyday citizens, but it's something that you would potentially look into. But I'm just trying to understand how we came to 3,000 and what you think are the drawbacks of going down to 2,700, if any.
Yeah, the initial streetlight install, we did our LED, our main and first LED conversion, which was on Flower Avenue, and then our second one was on Ethan Allen Avenue. Those were 4,000 Kelvin lights, and that was the recommendation from DOE and the outdoor lighting accelerator folks that we were working with. Just about after we'd finished that project, the American Medical Association came out fairly strongly with a position piece in paper, raising concerns about circadian rhythms and light impacts and quality of LED lighting, and really cautioning against using the brighter, bluer color in the Kelvin scale. And their recommendation was, when possible, to keep the Kelvin, the color rating at 3,000 rather than going to something higher in number. So that 3,000 number really was kind of kicked off by the American Medical Association and has been sort of become the a level that's been discussed now in the industry. So there's still some dissent and disagreement about it in some circles, but given that there's been issues raised about lighting impacts and overlighting, and it's not just an individual one, you see one light and it's going to mean you can't sleep at night. It's basically the collective increase of lighting in our everyday worlds and including in our tablets and phones and things like that. So that was really what kicked it off for us. And in fact, we were in the middle of streetlight conversations with the council. We hadn't talked about the Kelvin level at all until the American Medical Association report came out, and then that's became a kind of a keystone piece of what we set as our standard.
And the discussion that we had, I think it was last fall, on the wooden poles and the LED fixture or lights there, is that similarly at that Kelvin level, or is it?
Yeah, that was what the council's direction was.
That's what I thought.
That we would use 3,000 Kelvin. Again, the initial installs we did were not at 3,000 Kelvin, so everything in the future was directed to be 3,000 Kelvin.
So to the other point, just playing devil's advocate about how these lights are sort of lower to the ground, they complement those wooden poles throughout the city. And using the example of Flower Avenue, this is completely anecdotal, it's just based on my own observation. Flower Avenue is a very different thoroughfare that's much darker as compared to the areas we're talking about here. So could it be argued that the fact that this is complementary lighting to existing wooden poles, that the impact would be greater in terms of the impact on everyday citizens and individuals and the impact of light on them?
Yeah. Well, on Flower Avenue, we don't yet have decorative lighting. We only have the overhead street light lighting. The decorative lighting that we have is currently at about, the pole itself is 9 feet, and the fixture head is about almost 4 feet. So the light sits at about 12 feet or so. One of the pictures that I attached with that you have there at your dais is a picture of a woman walking by our decorative light. So as you can see, it's, a person comes in 5 foot about halfway. The rest of you're about halfway point of the light pole. The rest of the light pole is on top of you. So it's way over your head when you're walking by it. Of course, as you're approaching something, it can, you can see it at your eye level gaze. But the main point there is that we don't think that the Kelvin is going to have an effect. The Kelvin level is going to have effect of lighting at that level. What you really start getting into is your wattage and your lumen level. How bright is the light, in addition to what's the color of the light. So that's, again, what we rely on folks that do lighting analysis for a living to help us select what type of footprint we want the light to show on the ground as, what kind of foot candle or lumen level we want to have light at the ambient level at where a person is. And so that was a selection that we have of a 65 watt LED light. Our induction light, not that it's comparable, is at an 85 watt. It's a higher wattage level, which is also an energy use level and doesn't really translate into lumen outputs. But again, we're getting way into the weeds here. But I think the critical issue for light impact is your light level, your foot candle and your lumen level, in addition to the color. But those two things kind of integrate and work together.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Ms. Bailey, can I ask you, because this is in our new budget begins July 1st, and I know this was in last year, the FY17 budget. If we went ahead tonight, voted on this, and passed this, when would you be purchasing the lights, do you think?
Well, it would be in your first budget amendment to roll funds into that. We wouldn't be able to get them
done
before the end of this fiscal year. So I think last we knew we were expecting a 3-week manufacture cycle, something along those lines.
And is it possible to get a sample of the 2700?
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out the advantages and disadvantages of if we, say, council wanted to pass this tonight to let you move forward with the work, because I do think these streetlights need to, as you've pointed out, we need to move forward with repairing them. And then if we, since Mr. Sherman has brought this to the attention, OTBA is now aware of it. If people had more time to look at these two lights, if we were able to get the 2700, I don't know, what's the proper term?
Kelvin. Yeah, 2700 Kelvin.
Mm-hmm. Before the final order was put in. Is that possible? Does that mess up?
We can certainly find out. My guess is it would take the same 3 weeks to get the sample light, so then we'd just do an install, and then we could revisit the issue when people had a chance to look at it.
Okay. Councilmember Kovar?
Thank you. I want to say, first of all, I went over to the area last night, and this may be similar to what Councilmember Qureshi was saying. I think each person will probably have a different experience with that. I was over there, and I really couldn't tell between the various lights that were at that intersection. There's 3 or 4 around there, and you had told me which the specific one was, and so I saw that. It may just be that my eyes aren't sensitive enough to pick that up, but I didn't see a big difference. A couple of specific questions I had, and maybe you can just help me out here, and I appreciate the presentation. You mentioned that they can be adjusted, the ones we're talking about, but you said that's the wattage that gets adjusted, right?
Right.
So, but you said wattage, of course, isn't the same as the lumens. But if you turn down the wattage enough, does that mean that the overall brightness of it, as we would think of that term, would go down?
Right. Kind of think of your own dining room light with the dimmers. You're not changing the color at all as you dim it. It's still the same color. It's just reduced light
But
level.
who does that? Like a person walking by can't just do that.
Yeah, no, it's
They all have to be done together, or is there someone back at Public Works who could say,
yeah,
I'm
it's
going to...
not. We wish. No, these wouldn't be able to be digitally adjusted. It would be a switch within the light fixture itself. So each fixture, you'd go in, you'd open the housing, and you'd do whatever
So it's not
it is
something
to
that
change
you would
them.
do often, but if there was
Right.
an install, and then people said, it just seems a little too much, if there was an agreement,
Yeah.
our staff could go around and adjust that, right?
Right.
I just want to make, okay.
Yeah, it's something that's assumed that not something you would change a lot or do frequently, or just if it was too bright, you would.
Okay.
And there's a limit to the dimmability. I don't know what it is. Usually it's about 25%. You
Right.
could crank down to
Okay.
25% of that.
So,
light
and then
output.
just following up on what Councilmember Mail said, with what we're getting, can the colors change, or is that only something that...
No.
Okay.
I'll have to ask him. I don't know what the difference is and what's actually changing. Yeah, I just don't know.
Okay. So this is an area along Carroll and Laurel where you have both the conventional streetlights and these decorative lights. Are the conventional streetlights or the wooden pole lights, are they spaced the same distance they are everywhere else? Or because I think the question that was being asked by Councilmember Qureshi was whether do these make up for a wider thing, or is it actually just it's a little brighter in that area because it's a commercial area? Is that...
Yeah. It's a little brighter because it's a commercial area with, in some places, a fairly wide pedestrian, 10-foot wide sidewalks versus it's not just a 4-foot wide sidewalk. And it's a commercial area, so you have business components.
More
that are
activity and
going
so on
there.
taking
My
place.
guess is there's probably more overhead light in that area than there is on a residential street, certainly, because the residential street lights are spaced pretty far apart.
So just two other things then. On this wooden pole question, and there's a comment in the OTBA article or a letter about that. So it seemed to suggest that the earlier action only applied to wooden poles. Can you just clarify that point, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, I know when we had the discussion in front of council, we were specifically talking about overhead street lights, the PEPCO related. I mean, the decision was, were we going to go with a PEPCO conversion or our own purchase or a third party? So definitely the conversation was overhead street lights on wooden poles that the city did not own. The only similarity is the Kelvin level, which is we were talking about light pollution.
But that was
and
about our
light
relationship with PEPCO and whether we're going to own or lease or
Yeah, and our plan to convert our overhead streetlights, meaning the high overhead streetlights.
Okay.
Yeah.
It did strike me, and the mayor's comment about if it's going to take 3 weeks before this gets finalized, given the funding situation, and I am sensitive to my eyes aren't sensitive to the difference in the light, but I am sensitive to the idea that maybe people in the community didn't know about that the sample was out there, and now they do. The sample's out there. If that gives us time to have people just see what it's like, and then we make our final decision in 3 weeks, or is that what you were suggesting?
No, I was suggesting we vote on this tonight so that it doesn't get, because there's 2 weeks we're not, to give direction to the Public Works Department, but then to have it open to the public to comment on the, I'm going to use the wrong terms, the brightness, whatever they want to comment on regarding the sample. And then the Director of Public Works can come back to us and say, this is what we've heard, this is what we're seeing, and the recommendation for what to move forward with. And if other council members would like to, talk to...
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Smith, sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Braithwaite, have you had any complaints about the lighting on Flower Avenue?
No.
Okay. In Flower Avenue, we have switched out all of those bulbs to LEDs, correct? And what Kelvin are those bulbs?
They're 4,000 Kelvin.
4,000.
And they're at a higher lumen output, higher light level than these would be.
Okay. The idea when we first started talking about Flower Avenue and swapping these bulbs out to LED, Pepco promised us that they were going to give us this dashboard that we could control, I guess, the illumination of the lights. Has that materialized, or is that just
Not yet. Not yet. There's still.
skunk works?
Yeah, well, we would never be able to control it, but it would be a controllable light. So Pepco, as the owner of the light, could be asked to adjust a light level in an area. The lights would also be able to self-report when they're out or when they're day burning. So that's their primary interest, to be able to identify outage and day burning issues without having to have a person,
Report it.
Yeah.
If we go ahead and approve this request, and it's 26 fixtures, how many more do you anticipate having to replace?
That's it for
That's
we have a total of 61 lights between the junction and Old Town. So that path along Laurel and Carroll Avenue, it's a total of 61 lights. So all of them have been converted except for 26.
Okay. All right. Well, I think those are my questions. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Councilmember Schultz?
Yeah, I intend to support the resolution. I think we do need to pass it tonight, but I do have one question. Mr. Sherman's last slide showed a picture of the Bank of America building with 5 lights on the front of it. I understand that some businesses like to brighten up their facade so it glows in the night. It looks like Paris along the Seine or something like that. But there's sometimes when those kind of lights get in, they really invade people's bedrooms and other the sanctity of their darkness. And is there anything, and that happens to be where I live, because the lights across New Hampshire Avenue on top of the Takoma Overlook condominium, they're 120 feet up in the sky, and they shine down like aliens landing from Mars. And I'm telling you, it's really kind of, it lights up the interior of the house, our house, whether you like it or not. Is there anything that we can do or should do or that is happening in other municipalities to encourage private property owners, or multifamily properties and commercial, to take into consideration the impact of their lights?
Yeah. Some jurisdictions do have outdoor light or regulations and light levels and criteria, even facade advisory board type arrangements where you have to get approval. So it's one of those things that some jurisdictions have taken on very extensively. It's, again, kind of a determination about sort of what you want to regulate, how you want to regulate it, and how you're going to enforce. Again, in the original greenhouse gas inventory, we had a whole section on night light and some options discussed about trying to set standards for outdoor lighting at night.
That is something I would really be very interested in learning more about and trying to remedy. It may not be that there are a lot of situations like that in the city, but there might be some where it just gets to be kind of invasive, or in some cases just overly lit. Even in the commercial area, you could just get too much. And I'd hope that maybe we could focus on that in the future. Thank you.
Great, all right. No other comments. I'm going to suggest, before I move to, that we amend the resolution to add a whereas clause that says, whereas before a final decision on the Kelvin level to be ordered, the Director of Public Works will report back to the council regarding community feedback. Is that?
Sure.
All right. Would someone like to move the resolution as amended?
So moved as amended.
Councilmember Mail, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Schultz, second. Any other comments or questions? All right. It's a single reading ordinance, so we need a roll call.
Councilmember Kovar.
Aye.
Councilmember Male.
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi.
Aye.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Schultz.
Aye.
Mayor Stewart.
Aye. All right, thank you.